welcome back to another episode of the Young Professionals Podcast. Sarge, you great man. Who do we have on this week?
Luke, today we're speaking with Amy Elliot. Amy is a project and operations manager at Papermill Media, a digitally led PR communication, events and social media agency. Amy has a very colourful resume, having lived in the UK where she worked as a florist, founded a small business in Melbourne, worked with not-for-profits and spent a small stint at Tennis Australia working in marketing partnerships. Now coming up to 5 years at Papermill Media, an AFR Fast 100 business 2 years running, Amy has worked with some of Australia's leading brands. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. A place where we like to start is just understanding what your role is and what you do in that role. So could you please tell us what is a project and operations manager and what do you do?
I think before I sort of dive into the project and ops side, it's probably worth prefacing the comms and PR marketing industry. And anyone who is probably interviewed in this similar position who works in this industry will say no day is the same. And I think that's why I was drawn to it. There's a lot of variation. I work for an agency, so first and foremost, our clients come first. And so the foundation of any day is dealing with clients on the phone, lots and lots of emails, lots of meetings, making sure that our clients' needs and problems are always solved. But primarily it's, drafting social media calendars across LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. It's writing press releases. It's pulling together strategies and proposals. And those are kind of the nuts and bolts of the PR, social comm side of things. But at a business level, I also support Papermill and work really collaboratively with our team on new business, bringing in new clients, working on strategies for clients that aren't my own, and also sort of work in the finance and operations space. So I'm really, really lucky and privileged that my director sort of let me jump in and help her out with, client invoicing and the day-to-day operations of the business and helping the team run as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Sounds like there's a fair bit within your remit.
Gets busy.
Keen to understand, just to jump into like the operations side of things from a PR perspective, you mentioned you're drafting social media calendars and working out, just helping your clients manage their PR. What does that process look like? Like say you had a client come to you and they may be launching a new event or something like that. How would you go about helping them to do that?
I think first and foremost, the question is always, what is the problem the client needs to solve? And there's always a problem related to a commercial aspect of a business. And, that's why they're launching a new product or they're launching a new service. And as working in the comms and PR space, it's how do we solve that problem through effective communication to target audiences? So really it's our job to look quite holistically at the business need and problem and work out whether it's resolved through media relations, whether it's organic or paid. Is it social media? What's the brand presence like digitally? Does this brand need to target their audience through events and activations and experiences? And often what we find is that the best solution is a myriad of all of those options. And that's really what I love about what I do is there's no one solution fits all type scenario. We really have to look quite holistically and have a very commercially minded perspective on all kinds of business types, whether it's corporate, lifestyle, consumer. Papermill works a lot in the property space as well. So, it's kind of solving those day-to-day problems and then solving the bigger problems.
When you're pulling that stuff together, like how are you communicating it? Is this something that you do over the phone, in person, via email?
All of the above. It generally starts with a conversation, which we would then take that conversation within the business and have a really collaborative brainstorm around the best approach. We all have different strengths within Papermill. Mine are sort of in the events, activations type space. There are people who are absolute PR media guns. Then we have digital wizards who, are specialised in that area. But being able to sort of work in each of those areas throughout my career has allowed me to have a bit of visibility over how they're applied best. So, once we've had that conversation, it's generally a proposal, which is typed up in PowerPoint and given to our designers. And then it's a lot of presentations. So whilst it's good on paper, I need to be able to sit there and help my client understand what it is that we're trying to tell them and get their buy-in as well, and make sure that everyone's really aligned and on the same page.
And on that, for a bit of context for people, Papermill, particularly in Melbourne, I'm not too sure around the rest of the country, you can probably fill us in on that, is quite a well-known PR agency and comms agency. And, if you go on their website, you can see some pretty well-known brands that they've worked for. Can you run us through, from the events and activations side of things, I've kind of worked in events myself as a part-time job, so I understand what an activation is, but can you run us through what that is and what that would look like for one of the massive corporates that Papermill actually does work for?
I mean, events and activations is where I cut my teeth and actually got a foot in the PR and comms door. And now when we talk about events and activations, it's no longer enough for a brand to try and just host a little cocktail event. So when we run events, sometimes they are, 800-person family fun days out in Wyndham Vale. I'm talking jumping castles with Ferris wheels, food trucks, entertainment, a lot of compliance, OH&S type things that we need to consider to launch a display village. But then on the flip side, we work with a lot of really premium high-end luxury developers, and it's creating really boutique high-end experiences, whether it's hiring out the Stoke House and creating an immersive experience to introduce a new building of purchasers to meet one another. Or we've also sponsored Light Up Melbourne Festival. We've worked with clients who sponsored Light Up Melbourne Festival. So setting up a marquee, creating experiences for them to invite their VIP clients to participate in the festival. So it's as large as 1,000 people events, but it's also as small as creating a champagne tasting with the head sommelier of Vue de Monde for, 2 prospective buyers who can bring a couple of their friends along and taste 6 of the most expensive champagnes and have a nice intimate experience too. And that says just as much about a brand.
And I think if you were to write down all of that stuff on paper, and if people don't kind of understand the industry at all, which I by no means really do, but it's all very lavish and expensive and whatnot. But to provide some context, you might be working with, say, a property developer or whatever, and they're trying to sell apartments that are worth $4 or $5 million, for example. And it's like putting on these events, yeah, sure, it's lavish, but compared to what they're actually making and what they're trying to sell, it's really a drop in the ocean. Is that fair to say?
I don't know if it's a drop in the ocean, and I certainly wouldn't speak to a client's bottom line, but brands need to, I think COVID, for example, and this is something that I've looked quite deeply into, is COVID has meant that there's now a priority on brands to create really tailored quality over quantity experiences. I think gone are the days where we just throw big events and hope for the best. So yes, by and large, it might seem like a drop in the ocean, but that is fundamentally what a lot of sales strategies are built off now as well.
Mm-hmm. I think from a client spend perspective too, it's that I assume where the money comes out of is a marketing budget, and they might say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to run a very loose campaign just trying to hit anyone and everyone, or they could do what you described and go really targeted and say, no, we know we have 100 people that sit exactly in this area, and that's who we're going to go for. We're really going to tailor that experience to make sure we get them.
And it comes back to commercial objectives. You can't just throw an event without understanding the broader business objective, campaign objective, and then what's the ROI. Everything you do is measured. And again, another part of our job is really understanding what success looks like to a client. It's the first question that we ask at the end of all of this when we wrap it all up. What does success look like to you? And that's what we always work towards. So it's really just about understanding your client intrinsically so that whatever you put forward is always aligned.
I think that success point is super important for any industry, particularly Yeah, like any industry, wherever you're working, even you go to your boss to say, okay, what's the goal here? Like, what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah, always having that end goal in mind will make sure that you're focused and you're resolved, whether it's personally or for a client and for a campaign that you're trying to run. That will always be sort of the guiding light that will get you there.
And so you've spoken to a couple of people who work in PR and comms, but they're working in a corporate. So that their client is their boss, basically.
Mhm.
What is it like working at an agency where you've got such a diverse range of clients? And as you say, you really have to understand what the goals of those clients are, and they're going to be different depending on the industry that they're in. What kind of questions are you asking these clients to understand that in a bit more detail?
You know what? This is the thing I love the most about my job is my clients, and have really, really strong relationships with my clients. And I think in understanding, I mean, every brand has its own personality and identity. And that generally, whether it's a big business or a small business, comes from the top, or it's a cultural thing. And then you look at the product or the service that they're offering, and you have to understand who their audience is, put yourself in that audience's position, and try to appreciate what it is that they'd want out of the brand. Then a lot of it is data driven. So understanding, what's informed the decisions of the business. And then just having a really good relationship with your client where you can ask questions point blank and not be afraid to say, hey, I know you said we should do this, but why are we doing this? Should we look at this at a different angle? Should we reevaluate? And the other thing that I've learned throughout my career is that clients really respond to those kinds of questions where you actually ask them why they're doing something. And you ask that of yourself and your team too. And that's, like I said before, understanding objectives and goals. As long as you're really clear on that from the start and you keep coming back to that throughout a process, whether it's a campaign or a year, then that way your client knows that you're always reevaluating, reassessing, aligning, and that goes a really long way for building a good relationship and a positive outcome.
You mentioned before that brands have their own identities. Before you work with one of your clients or they launch a new product, or say you have a new client onboarded, what do you do to try and understand that identity of the brand? Like, will you try and get the product or like go into their store and get a vibe for what it's like?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have experienced it as best as you can as a consumer. Now, working in property, I wish I could say I was buying a $3 million apartment, but I'm not.
Just borrow it. Just rent it for the week.
I'm just, ask someone for it.
Interest rates are low at the moment.
Yeah, hot tip from Nick Sarge. If it's not something that you can put yourself in immediate perspective of, asking around, asking people who might fit that brief. Yes, experiencing the product, walking into the store, understanding the area. I mean, property, for example, I might not be able to buy the $3 million product, but I can understand how it feels to perhaps live the lifestyle in Collingwood, and understanding, and more so for property, like understanding the fabric of a community and the area that project is going to be built in is fundamental to all communications, because you're buying into a lifestyle, you're buying into a value set. And so anything that we do from a comms, community management, event side of things has to really resonate with that area. So there are brand identities, there are project identities, and there are a lot of layers beneath that. So all I would say is immerse yourself in that. And then before a client even comes to you, like, have as many experiences as you can. Keep an ear to the ground, always kind of know what's happening, what's hot, experience different suburbs, different types of cultural events and locations, and just get out there and do stuff, because you eventually will have a client or a brief that comes across your table where you'll be able to draw on that experience historically, or those people that you've met as well.
I think it shows really deep kind of critical thinking about a problem, where they're like, I want to sell this apartment block or whatever you're trying to sell in Collingwood. And the initial thought might be, okay, I'll try and get some rich people in here that can afford it. But you're really thinking layers and layers deeper than that. It's like, okay, we need to showcase the suburb or even the city if you're trying to get people from interstate or internationally, or if it's a really good food scene, or kind of fill in the blank. I think it's a really good exhibition of how you can really think about different problems and go really, really deep on things to capitalize on what you're trying to do. So I think that's great. Ames, before we kind of jump back to the start of your career journey and back to school, interested to get your thoughts on what it feels like to be the subject matter expert in the room. So say from a PR or comms perspective, when you're dealing with clients that are, the massive corporates around Australia, and I would imagine that you're being engaged by managers or high-level managers at those businesses. What is it like having to back yourself in a room with those people and say, no, I know my stuff. You're engaging me to tell you this, and this is the advice I'm giving. What's it like to back yourself in that position?
It's taken a long time to, have the knowledge, and that is your first kind of tool and key when speaking to senior figures within a business, is knowing your stuff. I also, and I don't know what I can credit this to, but I've never been afraid of sitting down at a table with anyone and having a conversation in a meeting. It's just never, whether it's a director, a CEO, I've always felt comfortable speaking to all levels of people. And then something that my director, Ash, taught me, and is the ultimate fallback, is like, you also don't know everything, and that's okay. And you can say to a client, you know what, I'm not particularly sure on that. Let me come back to you and I'll revert to my team because, they're experts in X, Y, and Z. And then, a senior executive will always appreciate that too. And so that's when you can call in on your team. But, for me, it's just trying to find a connection with whoever that senior executive is, doing your research on them, understanding, where they worked previously. Do you have a mutual connection? What, where's their office based? What sort of hotspots are around their office? Finding things for small talk, and just not being afraid, which is much easier said than done. And I know it's not easy for a lot of people too, and I'm very lucky that that's the case. But I've also had people around me who have shown me how to conduct themselves in those meetings, and I've sat in on those meetings with those senior people, like my director, who is an absolute gun in a boardroom. So again, experience and confidence will come with time.
I think I'm just trying to remember who it was. I think it was Aidan Slack who we had on early on in the show, and he said that one bit of advice is that when you're intimidated by someone, it's understand that they probably don't know what they're talking about 100% of the time either. So everyone's just a person, and they're probably at least pretending a little bit. So everyone's probably in the same shoes as you. Totally. Ames, let's jump back to kind of school days and understand what your thinking was around then and what your experience was like at school, and then kind of pushing out of school. Do you want to run us through kind of what you thought you were going to be after school and what subjects you were doing and where your thoughts were at that time?
I was thinking about this before the show, and I'm thinking back, I can't remember what I wanted to be or do when I was at school because, truth be told, I had absolutely no idea. And I think I was trying to force myself into a box or a category. Hindsight, I'm pretty creative. I loved arts, design, but I also really enjoy business acumen, the commercial side of things. And I think I felt as though I needed to pick sides. So I picked a side, and well, actually I didn't pick a side. I kind of floundered through school, was really good at sport. I really enjoyed legal studies. I loved politics and national and international politics. I did those throughout school. But I think I chose electives which would get me a better ATAR and not necessarily sort of a VisCom arts route. And I think I will regret that because it's a side of myself that I shoved away really early in my life, and you need to allow yourself to explore those kinds of things. My mum, or not my mum, I won't throw her under the bus, sorry mum. But, I would throw around ideas of what I wanted to be, like a lawyer, a journalist. People suggested that I worked in events, and people would tell me, no, you can't do that because your writing's not good enough. My writing to this day still needs working, but, or you don't read enough, or you don't do this enough, or you're not this and you're not that. So then I was lost, and I finished high school. I got an ATAR, and to this day, no one, not even my mum, knows that ATAR, because I fundamentally don't want to be defined by what I got at high school, or at least that was my thinking then. The minute I walked out of those doors at high school, no one ever asked me about my ATAR. So that just goes to show something you build up. In my situation, counted for nothing really in the end. I spent 6 months at Swinburne doing arts, because what do you do when you don't know what you want to do? You kind of study arts, or at least that's what I thought. And then I kind of went, well, what am I doing? And decided to get a bit of life experience. My dad was from Scotland. I've got family in the UK. So I up and left with 800 Aussie dollars and moved to London for 6 months. I thought I would go there and get a nannying job, because I'd been a swim teacher in Melbourne. I'd nannied and babysat for many, many years, and decided to actually apply for a bunch of jobs on Gumtree and got one as a florist. So I told
And how
them,
much florist experience did you have?
0. In fact, I don't think I'd ever really picked up flowers in my life, but here was a job that was paying 10 quid an hour cash. So
I really hope that the one listener in the UK that we have is this person.
I pray that they never find out. But I got the hang of it, and we had our regular customers who would walk up and down the street, on a Friday afternoon, buy some flowers for their wife in a suburb that I won't disclose. So this is nondescript. Came back and started a commerce degree, at Deakin. Why? All my friends were really smart, studying law, international law, commerce. Everyone was at Deakin. I thought, if I don't know what I'm going to do, I may as well start there. I got 2 years into my degree, and I think I failed like 6 subjects. And then I had an opportunity through a really good girlfriend who is very much a mentor, and she actually got me an internship at Clemenger BBDO while I was studying commerce. Went to Tennis Australia, and she said, hey, there's this job going in my team, marketing partnerships assistant, which basically means you work on the Australian Open. So I think I kicked off in August. It was a 6-month contract, and my role was to support one of the partnership managers who had a portfolio of major sponsors. So really looking at their contract deliverables and making sure that we're ticking all of those boxes come the end of the tournament. One of the best experiences of my life. And if anyone has an opportunity to take on that job, which I think comes up annually, do it. Like, it's a whirlwind, but it's some of the best experience you'll ever have with brands. And then, lots happened in between. I started a nanny and babysitting agency, which ran for 4 years, and I ran that whilst getting experience in a variety of other things. I volunteered at YGAP as a campaign. I don't actually remember what my title was, but I worked on the 5 cent campaign with YGAP, and couldn't speak highly enough of their work, and was given a lot of opportunity to work in the NFP space, which really helped me kind of cement my personal values in terms of how I think businesses should run and what I believe in. And then somewhere in amongst all that, I think the day I found out my contract at Tennis wasn't going to be extended, Kelly, who was my mentor, said, hey, just update your LinkedIn profile. You've been working in marketing partnerships, but you've asked to do A, B, and C with the Australian Open Festival, and it's actually very sort of PR events focused. Update your profile to say this. 24 hours later, I get a LinkedIn message from my now boss, Ash, asking if I wanted to work part-time on a 6-week contract to launch St. Collins Lane, which is the shopping precinct in CBD. And if it counts for anyone, and when I was talking to Ash about this podcast, she said, Ames, if it helps, let people know I didn't look at your ATAR and I didn't look at what you studied on your CV. I saw your experience, and then you came in and sat in my office, and I asked you a few questions, and I went, this girl kind of gets it. And she gave me a chance. So I ran that. I worked for 6 weeks, and then at the end of the 6 weeks, I said, I'll do whatever you want. I'll source images for proposals. I'll run coffees.
You were hungry.
I was hungry, and I was really driven and a sponge for a good 3 or 4 years. And here I am today.
I just wanted to jump in there because a bit of backstory. We used to teach swimming together back in kind of high school, and that's where we met each other. But I still remember to this day, the first day I met you, and it was at this training thing for the swim school, and I didn't know anyone there, and I sat down kind of at the end of the row, and you came up to me and said, "Hey, how you going?" and engaged me in probably the most engaging conversation I've had as a 14-year-old boy working at some swim school. And I remember it to this day because no one that I'd really met at that age had that innate skill of being comfortable, like you said, sitting down at a table and talking to anyone. And the reason why I bring that up is because people that go through, say, school or university and fail subjects or don't get a fantastic ATAR score, they're made to feel like they've failed something. But I think a lot of people don't sit down and think about, okay, why didn't I do well at that? Because particularly in your case, you're clearly a very smart person and you've got a very wide skill set, which is evident from your work. But was there a piece in that where you go, okay, I failed X subjects at uni. Is it because I'm not smart, or is it because I'm just not, like, this doesn't light a fire under me? I don't really care that much. And I suppose where I'm going with that is that if people are in that position and you failed a couple of subjects at uni, or you're not doing that well at school, it's like, well, are you interested in what you're doing? And does that need a change of thinking into, okay, what does interest me? And then go and find that and get hungry about that. Because if you're a smart person and you're like, why am I failing at this? Because shouldn't really be that hard. It's probably just because your interests aren't aligned with what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, to the first point of failure, as cliche as it sounds, there's so much opportunity for success in failure. And unless you make a mistake, you'll never learn who you are, what you like, where your strengths are, how you do it again. And to the point of uni, there are people who can study and really enjoy that. My sister is an absolute brainiac and one of them, and I couldn't. Not to say that I might never be able to. Who knows? I might go back and study, but I like getting my hands dirty and I like getting in amongst it, and I learn really good practical skills on the job. And it took me, seeing out those failed subjects to go, hang on, why am I pushing shit uphill? Realistically, get me in the thick of it, get me a job where I can prove myself, grow my strengths and attributes and find success that way. I think your 20s or, leaving high school through the first 10 years of your career should be really working out what you are naturally intrinsically good at and the things that are a little bit more challenging, and then choosing those challenging things over the easier ones all throughout that period of your life to work out whether, you can strengthen those skill sets and add them to your ammunition, or go, hang on, that's not my area of expertise. Not to say I'll never do it, but let me work with what I'm really, really good at the end of that sort of rough 10, however long period, and work to your strengths. And I think Papermill's allowed me to put my hand up to do the things that aren't natural for me, like writing, media relations. That was never easy for me initially. And my friends used to tease me about how bad my grammar and spelling was in text messages. And even when I ran my small business, it was never a strong suit. And here I am working in an industry where it's the basic fundamental of, the box you need to tick to get the job. And, I think just, work out where your strengths lie. And for me, it was people, it was understanding clients, it was getting shit done. And if you have those things, you can learn the rest along the way.
Do you want to just give a backstory of that that sentence there?
I think it's so cool. At Papermill, we have our own business cards, and everyone within the team has, a phrase that speaks most to them as a team member. And, some people have eat, sleep, pitch, repeat. Some people have coffee, coffee, copy. Mine was just get shit done. And it's always fun handing that business card over to a a senior executive at a client, but it's the truth. Like, it's what I do. I'm a project manager. If something needs to happen or it needs to get done, I will find a way and I will get it done.
Amy, before when you were talking about school, you said something to the effect of you had to put yourself in a box or you had to choose sides. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, for me, and not everyone's like this, but I was creative and I was, let's say, business focused. And when you're leaving school and you need to choose a degree or an industry to get into, it very much feels like a decision that needs to be made on the spot. My decision was made on the spot, but then I deviated from that 5 or 6 times in the 5 years after high school. And it got me to where I should be right now at this point in my life. And I'm absolutely going to deviate 5 or 6 times in the next 10 years as well. But I think there's this sense that we need to choose an identity and choose who we should be for that next amazing chapter in our lives after you finish school. And the truth is there's no one answer and there's no one size fits all. You kind of need to fumble. And if university and choosing a degree doesn't fit your brief at the time, well then find something that's going to give you some life experience, that's going to give you those fundamentals of what are my personal values, what is success going to look like to me, you know, what fills me up and what are my strengths. And when you work out those things, it makes a decision of where you want to work and how you want to apply yourself a lot easier.
Looking back and even now, like, do you think that adopting that attitude or stereotyping or tagging, labeling, whatever you want to call it, do you think that's the right thing to do?
No, is the short answer. Who you are in high school is not who you'll be 5 years out of high school. And it's definitely not who you be 10 years out of high school. I think I'm coming up to my 10-year reunion. There's no way I could have ever predicted I would have ended up where I am now and had the experiences along the way. So, you know, really all I would recommend to anyone finishing high school is don't feel like you have to make a decision then and there. The future feels like a really big, long time when you're staring at it from that point of view, but when you look back, it's not. And just seek out opportunities and say yes to opportunities. And those will eventually create their own path, which feels a lot more natural and organic to you.
And with that, Ames, you spoke about, you know, you were interested in writing or, being a lawyer or fill in the blank. And someone said, well, you can't do that because you're not good at writing. Mm-hmm. My advice to, say, someone in year 10, if you get that from someone, and it could be your parents or your teacher or whatever, in a very polite way, say, get stuffed until I've gone and actually asked someone who works in that field and understood what they would actually be doing. And if then you've done some research and you go, oh, actually, they're right, that's not really for me, then, okay, take that advice. But if they don't work in the field themselves and they don't really know your skill set, that advice is, I would say, in my opinion, irrelevant until you've gone and done your own, diligence on that and can make a decision for yourself. Because who's to assess a 16-year-old person's skill set when they're 16 about what they'll be doing when they're 25 or 30? And
you have every right to be annoyed about that. Like, it's not someone else's decision to tell you what you can and can't be or do. And it sounds cliche because it's hard. You look up to teachers, careers counsellors, parents, and you think you're an authority on these things. You've had more life experience. Surely you know. The truth is generally they don't. And the best solution to that is put yourself out there. You know, social media, a digital world makes it so easy to jump on Instagram, Facebook, ask your family and friends and reach out to anyone who is working in the space that you think you want to get into. I know if someone reached out to me, I would be more than happy to sit down for a coffee, put in a phone call, and I have many, many times, because that is always the thing that gives you the most clarity.
Amy, you're a very purpose-driven person. What advice would you have for students who may be struggling with that purpose, particularly in the school or whilst they're at school? Either they don't know what they want to do or they're not really finding school engaging. How do you think students should go about finding some sort of purpose to put them back on the right track?
putting yourself out there and putting out what you think you want into the universe will generally throw back some opportunities. Say yes to all of those opportunities, because that's how you start to sort of narrow down where it is that you think you want to be and what you want out of the world. But I also think that no one should go into a job just thinking this is a job that I'm going to work 9 to 5 and I'm going to pay the bills. I think we all work bloody hard and we've got to work towards something that feels right deep down inside. I didn't know what that was leaving school. I don't think anyone could. But now when I look back on everything, I sort of think, well, what matters to me is connectivity, quality over quantity. Those types of things will then set you up for where you head next. So yeah, just doing stuff and getting out there and putting yourself out there and volunteering, work for free. Like, you know, remuneration is great and getting paid for your time is great, but there's no better remuneration when you're starting off than experience. So throw yourself out there, because that will always, by and large, get more value for you.
And I think the thing that revolves around is the ability to create a relationship with a person. So whether it's, you know, it might sound a bit weird, but I totally agree with you. Like if you know someone goes to a cafe, like go and stalk them out, like go and say hi. But it requires you to go and meet someone as Amy going to meet fill in the blank person name. And
just on like connections and relationships, that is always, when you're working in PR and comms, it's a no-brainer. But I think more broadly, there is no person who is not worth having a relationship with. There's no bridge that should ever be burnt. And the networks that you build along the way will always be your biggest asset, because no matter where you go or what you do, you'll always be able to call on that person. And so, yeah, just maintain as many relationships as possible, because they always come in handy.
And just on that, Amy, I think one thing I really want to spell out is it's one thing to know that someone's going to be at the coffee shop and you've sussed them out and you know they're going to be there, but it's another thing to be able to actually go up to them, engage them in such a way that it's valuable.
Yes.
So like you've kind of got like two parts of the equation. One part, you need to find them. The other part is you actually need to engage them, and say you've got 30 seconds or whatever it may be, you've really got to make every second of those 30 seconds of that interaction count.
Yeah.
You mentioned surrounding yourself with good people. Who are some of your mentors that you've had across your time?
Spencer Shirley is the director of Papermill. She started Papermill when she was 24 and has built it up to what it is today. And I'm very lucky to have gone along half of that business journey with her. Kel McBride was at tennis. Then she was at Pack Brands, and she's an absolute gun. My partner's dad is also a really good voice of reason. My sister, who will tell me when I'm being ridiculous. My partner, who will shake me out of anxiety and any concerns or worries that I have. You have to surround yourself with people who will empower you and encourage you, but also people who will give you a really good perspective and lens to make sure that you're always serving your purpose and doing what is best for you as well.
If you could choose one attribute that these people have that really why they're such great mentors and friends to you, what would that be?
I don't think I can answer that question, because they don't have one shared attribute, and that's why they are my network. Everyone in your network will probably achieve a different end and help you in a different way, and that's why you have your network, because they supplement the things that don't come naturally to you or that you haven't had experience with. So in fact, I would say find people that do different things and serve different purposes, and really invest in those relationships, because they're the ones that will carry you through your career.
I couldn't agree more, Ames. And on that, to wrap up, what would be something that you would like to leave, I guess, some younger people coming through?
Put yourself out there and get as much experience as you possibly can, because that's the most invaluable asset that you'll have when you're trying to navigate your way through things. And along that journey, you'll meet people that you want to, put in your handbag or your man bag and call on in future.
Ames, thanks for coming on the show today. I think we covered some really valuable insights, particularly for people that think they might not be hitting whatever mark that society is putting them on them, or their parents or their school or whatever. It's going to be all right if you kind of, I guess, get a second guess the status quo and challenge things. And if something's not working, make a change, because it'll work out if you do that. So really appreciate the time, and thanks for coming on with us.
Thanks, guys. Love the podcast. Can't wait to listen to the rest.